The theme of forbidden knowledge is a common one in Western folklore, and equally common is a certain sort of narrative that involves forbidden knowledge. It goes like this. The protagonist is warned that there's a source of knowledge that they should never seek. Then the protagonist is given an opportunity to seek it, and once they seek it, they are caught and punished. This is all meant to teach a lesson, either about the source of knowledge or the source of the forbidding power, or both. Perhaps most famously, you have the very first human beings in the Garden of Eden who sought knowledge from the forbidden tree. Or you might look to Beatrix Potter's tale of Peter Rabbit, who is warned not to seek whatever is in the garden. Perhaps most horrifically, however, is the tale of Bluebeard. A singular man with a blue beard who murders every woman he marries, one after the other. Each new bride is given the freedom to roam Bluebeard's massive castle, to explore room after room, and they're forbidden only from looking into one single room, which inevitably they look in. That forbidden room holds the murdered corpses of Bluebeard's previous brides. And thus, whether she escapes to safety or no, Bluebeard's bride suffers an awful fate. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and today we're going to talk about the Ravenloft subdomain of Blaustein, or Bluestone. This is part of the Sea of Sorrows, which in 5th edition, as Ravenloft's only ocean-bound or sea-bound domain, is divided up into a number of different islands, each with its own adventure opportunities and horror story behind it. As with all my Ravenloft videos, we'll talk about what the domain is, list some media to help us get an imaginative grip on it, and then sketch out a short adventure. In our case, the adventure is a short and terrifying tour of Bluebeard's castle for adventurers of level 5. Before we get started, though, what is Blaustein? Well, the dizzying island fortress of Blaustein is ruled by the notorious and bloodthirsty Bluebeard, a serial murderer of wives. Every wife he kills eventually returns to haunt him, just as every new wife he takes is destined to discover his bloodthirsty secrets. As I mentioned, Blaustein is based on the tale of Bluebeard, and its presence in Ravenloft goes back to 2nd edition. The 5th edition version, though sparsely described, doesn't seem to be very different from the 2nd edition version, but we are going to take some creative liberties, especially inspired by the Magpie Games storytelling RPG Bluebeard's Bride. Now, if you're a fan of the 2nd edition iteration of this domain, I highly suggest checking out Gabriel Jensen's YouTube channel, The Hour of the Raven. He has a really great video on the old-school 2nd edition Blaustein, and I highly recommend that. As for the newer 5th edition iteration of the domain and our variations on it for the adventure, let's go over some bits of media that will help us get an imaginative grip on the place. First, for reference, I'd like to recommend the 2011 anthology edited and compiled by Heidi Ann Heiner, simply called Bluebeard Tales. This is a very excellent and thorough compilation, which includes hundreds of different versions of the tales, not just different versions of the folklore, but modern retellings, lyric poetry, opera librettos, and even more Bluebeard works. It's an indispensable reference document if you're interested in the folklore. I also recommend taking a listen to the 1918 opera by Bela Bartok, Bluebeard's Castle. I particularly enjoy the one that was conducted by Sir George Schulte. This is an interesting version of the tale because Bluebeard and his wife, Judith, are engaged in a kind of dialogue, and she's much more forgiving than Bluebeard's wives usually are when they discover that he's a serial murderer. And I also recommend the 2015 horror film directed by Guillermo del Toro, Crimson Peak. Although this film doesn't have a guy with a physically blue beard, and although some details are changed, this is a retelling of the Bluebeard story. It's very well performed, very well directed, and on previous occasions, that is in previous Ravenloft videos of mine, I've talked about how cool the ghosts are too, so take a look at that. I also highly recommend the TTRPG Bluebeard's Bride by Magpie Games. I recommend it so much, in fact, that I'm going to do a video on how to play it. This is a really imaginative, powered by the apocalypse, horror-based storytelling game, and for the sake of getting inspiration for writing a D&D adventure, I would especially look at the supplement, The Book of Rooms. Indeed, the adventure that we're going to lay out is going to be a lot easier to run if you have the Book of Rooms, although you don't need it. I should also mention the 2018 horror film, Elizabeth Harvest. This is an interesting film. It's a really wonderful film to watch the first half of. The first half of the film is a retelling of the Bluebeard story with some interesting changes, and then the second half is weird ad hoc chaos that doesn't make any sense and, in my opinion, kind of ruins the film. I would say watch the first 108 minutes, and from there, well, I can no longer recommend the film. I also, for some tonal inspiration, recommend the video game Slay the Princess from 2023. This game applies some playful role reversal to the Bluebeard myth. since the player controls a Bluebeard-esque character who is repeatedly pressured to kill a series of women who lie behind forbidden doors. The homicidal situation is played out over and over and over with some interesting thematic variations depending on which choices your character makes, and this is a lot like Bluebeard himself marrying woman after woman after woman and killing them. And finally, there's the 1991 2nd edition Ravenloft supplement, Dark Lords. This is the official 2nd edition supplement that covers Blaustein. It's got an isometric map of his castle, it's got a list of his former wives who are all ghosts, and so on. And while I think this version is fine, we are, as I said, going to be doing something a little bit different with the domain. Okay, with influential media out of the way, here's basically how our Blaustein adventure is going to go. The PCs awaken to find themselves having washed up on the cold, rain-beaten shore of some island. An island that doesn't seem to hold anything except for barren rock and a giant castle. Should they enter the castle, they find a young bride. The bride has a ring of keys, and she was given permission to explore the vast castle and look at its various rooms. She was only forbidden to look at one room. She bids the PCs to escort her and keep her safe as she goes to explore these various rooms. And as they go, the PCs encounter all manner of ghostly threats, eventually rousing the bride's suspicions, at which point she goes to the one door that was forbidden to her. Opening it, she finds a horrible truth, and just then Bluebeard comes back, and it's a boss fight. So let's lay out this level 5 adventure in a bit more detail. As I mentioned, this adventure is for level 5 PCs, and it begins with them waking up on a rain-beaten, cold, rocky shore. It's the shore of an island, and it looks like there's nothing on the island but a giant castle. The gates are open, and the PCs are free to walk in. As for escaping the island, it is already wrapped in a heavy storm, and turbulent winds prevent any PCs from flying away. Likewise, turbulent waters prevent any swimming PCs from doing the same. Surveying the castle's interior, the PCs find that there are hallways upon hallways, and rooms upon rooms, all in limitless number. Every door, however, is locked and sealed off with magic. Sooner or later, the PCs should come across a lovely woman in a bridal gown. She holds an enormous keyring with hundreds and hundreds of keys on it. Spotting the PCs, she explains her predicament. Her new husband has gone on a journey and given her a ring of keys that open up every door in this massive castle. She's allowed to visit every room except for one, his private study. She wants to explore these rooms, but she confesses that she's scared of this old castle and asks the PCs to accompany her. If the PCs ask, the bride will say that her name is Judith, and her husband is Bluebeard. Now, if the PCs want, they can split up, but this is not going to accomplish very much because they cannot open the doors on their own. They need the keyring that the bride has. Furthermore, only the bride knows which keys go into which locks. There's otherwise simply no way to tell, and the PCs would spend hours, if not eternity, going through each key for each lock and trying to find the combinations. In order to explore the castle, therefore, we're going to take a mechanic, an ingenious mechanic, I love this mechanic, from Bluebeard's Bride by Magpie Games. The mechanic goes like this. The bride presents the keyring to the PCs. She asks the PCs to choose a key. And in order to do this, the DM just asks the players, or asks one player, to describe a key that they select. What is the key made of? What are its teeth like? What ornaments the key's head? Does it have a certain texture or a certain smell? Describe the key in detail. And then, based on that description, the DM will either come up with a room that it goes to, or choose a room from a pre-selected list. And here, again, I would highly recommend just taking the Book of Rooms from Bluebeard's Bride. So the DM asks the players to describe a key, the players describe a key, and then, based on that description, the DM selects a room or decides what's in that room. The players might take turns describing different keys, or it might be a collaborative process, or it could be whoever cares about doing it can do it. But that's the way that we're going to open up and explore various rooms in Bluebeard's castle in Blaustein. Now, once a key is selected, the bride will open up the door that it goes to and enter, hopefully with the PCs. For several moments after the bride enters, the door will slam shut, and it will not open again until whatever dangers in that room have been resolved. And yes, each room has dangers. Ghostly dangers. Each room should have a collection of spooky objects that the bride or the PCs could investigate. And as soon as they investigate one of those spooky objects, it summons a kind of ghostly creature or a monster which the PCs must do battle with. When the battle is over, the room opens. Now, it's important that the various monsters that the PCs discover and the various objects that the PCs investigate, they all reveal something horrific or suggest something horrific about Bluebeard. They're all incriminating. It could be that the PCs discover the ghosts of former brides that Bluebeard has slain. It could be that they come across the ghosts of Bluebeard's former children who he's slain. It could be that they come across the ghosts of servants that he's abused. Or it could be that they come across implements of torture or violence, which are now animated with negative energy. In each case, the PCs will discover something incriminating, and in each case, the PCs will have an opportunity to convince the bride that her husband is a monster. Without any effort to convince her, the bride will always make up some excuse and rationalize and come up with a reason why her husband isn't so bad after all, and why he must be misunderstood instead. To convince her, the PCs must make a persuasion check or an intimidation check or some other check that the DM deems appropriate. And once the PCs have convinced the bride 3 times, that's when she heads to the Forbidden Room, opens it up, reveals the grisly remains of Bluebeard's former brides, and that's when Bluebeard comes home angry. So here are some examples of what I mean. The bride presents a keyring. The PCs select a delicate porcelain key. The DM decides, a porcelain key, that should go to a tea room. So they all go into a tea room. There in the tea room, they find that cups and serving trays are coated in old blood. Upon further investigation, they are attacked by a gallows speaker, the ghost of a servant who was slaughtered because they served tea incorrectly. When the PCs defeat the gallows speaker, the bride muses that the tea must have been served absolutely terribly. Maybe that's why Bluebeard had no choice but to kill the servant. In response, the PCs have an opportunity, a DC 17 skill check, to try to convince the bride that no, this is a monstrous thing. Either way, after that they leave, and the process repeats. The bride holds out the keyring and the PCs select a key. Or maybe the PCs describe a key which is coated in fur. The DM reasons, that could go to a hunting room or a trophy room, and so into a trophy room the bride and the PCs go. There in the trophy room, in addition to taxidermied animals, there's also at least one taxidermied human being. All the grisly carcasses come to life and start attacking the PCs. And the taxidermied humans moan and scream, "Why? Why did you hunt us?" Give them the statistics of zombies so that you can have a good handful of them. After the battle, of course, the bride will rationalize. She'll say, those poor servants, they must have been killed in a hunting accident. It was an accident, of course. And it will be up to the PCs to make a DC 17 skill check to see whether they can convince her otherwise. Maybe the PCs describe a key that is coated in leather, and it goes into some kind of room full of restraining devices, and the PCs fight angry ghosts there. Maybe the key is tufted with feathers, and so the DM decides, that should go to an aviary. And inside the aviary, the PCs get attacked by harpies, each of whose heads is that of a former bride. It's been cut off and sewn to the body of a bird. For each key, there's a uniquely horrifying room. For each horrifying room, there's something indicative of Bluebeard's monstrousness. And for each indication, there's a new rationalization from the bride, and an opportunity to convince her otherwise. Now again, just as a reference document, I would highly recommend using the Book of Rooms from the Bluebeard's Bride TTRPG. It really helps run this sort of thing. And even if you don't, it's worth just coming up with a list of different kinds of rooms. An observatory, a kitchen, a music room, a sewing room, a torture chamber, an armory, a library. Make a list of lots of different kinds of rooms and add a monster or two that you think would be appropriate to it. Then, when a player describes a key, you can select which one of those you think would be most appropriate for that key. Now, once the PCs have succeeded on 3 different checks to convince the bride that her husband is a monster, she panics, and she stops rationalizing. She immediately runs to the door that leads to Bluebeard's study, puts the key in and opens it, and there, the PCs see the disgusting, mutilated carcasses of Bluebeard's former brides. We're gonna say there's a half dozen of them, and each one has the statistics of a boneless. They lower themselves from meat hooks on which they have been impaled, and crawl towards the PCs and attack. And as they are attacking, throughout the battle, the PCs can hear a booming, regular, thudding noise. Thump. 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 Like the footsteps of a giant. They get louder and louder and faster, and eventually toward the end of the combat with the boneless brides, the PC's living bride companion exclaims, "Oh no! He's here! Bluebeard is here!" And sure enough, he is. He has the appearance and the statistics of a hill giant, except that his intelligence is 19, and he has, of course, a long blue beard. He fights to the death, and as the PCs fight him, the various ghosts that they fought and slayed appear all around, laughing and jeering. Shortly after the boss fight begins, the room begins to fill with water, seawater, and mist, and more mist, until finally, when the killing blow is struck, one of the walls of Bluebeard's castle bursts forth, flooding with dark, inky water. As the PCs are washed away, the last thing that they hear is the bride's scream. So there's our adventure in Blaustein. What do you think? Did you like the storytelling and encounter selecting method that we took from the role-playing game Bluebeard's Bride? Or would you have preferred a much more traditional castle crawl? Let me know in the comments. This is the first of a few different Ravenloft videos about the Sea of Sorrows that I hope to release in rapid succession, so we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Don't forget to do all the internet things. Click like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell if you want notifications on new content that I upload on this channel. And thanks!